Here we are together again for our next podcast session. Tess, Ben, how are you?
Surviving is probably the word of the week, even though it's Monday. Was supposed to go on a trip to a conference the last few days, but had to recover instead. So so I'm doing all right.
You've been under the weather.
Yeah, it's when you get anything like a cold or kind of any basic annual sickness, but then that one symptom just sticks and won't go away. It's very much that.
There's a lot of it going around at the moment, that's for sure.
How about you, Tess?
Yay, that's great.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I never used that term, but lately I've been using it. There's lots going on with my family. My mom got diagnosed with dementia, and she's in a care home, but also going to sell the house, the family house, and my brother has his own mental problems. So it's a lot's going on family-wise. So the last month we have been traveling between 3 different countries back and forth, and so.
Well, you guys, you two had a chat, didn't you, last week when I wasn't available?
Look forward to,
and didn't you come up with something that was a little bit juicy? I don't know what it was. I don't know what the subject was, but what came up?
I mean, we were definitely talking about.
I just want to say,
we were doing some
in
exploring.
the first version of this, we just had a talk
kind of
before.
Discourse. And outcomes.
What are we talking about? And then we said,
I know I was right in the middle of.
Let's do a different law this time. Let's just
organize a disinformation lab.
Thinking about what are we talking about, and then
a topic that was on my brain. How we
listen to this later, so you see also
how we influence each other in groups, even if that group is just 2 or 3 people.
Okay,
right?
What's going on with this? I mean, where are we going today?
And how that informs, just a lot of how we think about information, or how we get close to people and share vulnerable things. It's tricky. No. And well, because it's also like that all ties into how, I mean, even just the very nature of shelter was never designed to be something that was for profit, right? That there's a for-profit element in people having shelter. So when we talk about even basics,
we talked about like things are breaking down. I mean, that's not new. But
and people having
kind of talk about
basic
we
shelter.
came kind of into really state development, and we talked
something that's now more of a premium.
The term of shelter economy. That
how do we reconcile that? It's
we're looking
tricky.
for what is our shelter in the next years to come.
When you talk about shelter, do you sorry,
Ben, do you remember that, or shall we switch to something?
I was going to say, are you talking about the organisation, the charitable organisation Shelter that helps people, or are you just talking about shelter full stop?
No, I mean full stop, right? Like where do we even feel like we have a basic right to exist, have basic essentials, right? If that's something that's already being made to feel like it's a premium, right? Then where are the mistakes really being made? So that's why I was saying that the whole element of shelter, right? Like the commercial element of shelter too was never designed to be something that's for profit, right? Land is something that's a safe place for people to invest
I think
in,
there was also
but now it's very much turned into something that's
please.
weaponized against people, where you have more people who are rough sleepers, more people who are homeless, you have more people perhaps than ever across the board who are 1, 2, 3 paychecks away from being rough sleepers and stuff, right? So this idea of shelter is no longer seems like it's a basic human right. It's something we have to fight for, which is pretty wild to me.
And I think I'd like to add something to this. Like yesterday with my partner, we talked about something we experience in circles of regeneration or leadership, that lots of people are in the phase
I
of
think the
talking
focus
about
on
what
that
we need, what we
has
should
kind
be
of
like.
been
We should
like
build
there
these
are
islands of
communities
sanity,
that are
what
trying,
Charles
like
Eisenstein
intentional
talks about.
communities,
We
for
should
example,
build
right?
places
Where
which connect
it's more
us
based
and
on
where we can
developing a
feel
community
connected.
with an
But
ethos rather than just a
for lots of
community
people,
that
it's
has
still
money
about that kind
to
of
bring into
talking,
it.
because they're just entering
But there's
that
so much of a commercial
discomfort which we're
apparatus
all
that
in,
has
and
gotten just
it's
continued to
safer
get bigger
to
and
talk
bigger
about concepts of what we like to do,
that
but not
is not
particularly talking about,
interested
okay,
in entertaining that,
what are we doing now?
right? They're
Are
interested
we building
in
new shelters, new forms of shelters,
basically
or
exploiting
what do
every
they look
inch
like?
of
What are they
possible
sheltering us
property.
from?
So even one of my favorite
And
food
maybe
halls is a
that
large
could
food
be
hall
quite,
in London
it's quite a juicy topic,
called
because
Mercato
it
Metropolitano,
goes from
which
thinking
has
about
been like
something to
a
actually doing something.
great like cultural, cornerstone of sociality. It's getting wiped off the board. Like they announced it because a large commercial company wants to build another skyscraper, right? So that's not something that's going away. It's continuing to be. Money is essentially winning that argument, because a lot of people want to join or shape intentional communities. It still does require a monetary commitment, and a lot of people just aren't in a place to be able to do that. So that's it right there.
Well, there's also the big movement around these 15-minute cities, isn't there, at the moment? So there's this kind of this next big thing in community sheltering, but it's obviously completely for people that can afford it. And then there's the question about why are they doing that? It's to Tess's inquiry. Well, possibly climate change is going to get us to a point where we are going to be able to move around less distances. So therefore, everything needs to be within 15 minutes of our immediate environment, protected. I mean, granted, these places are being built in deserts at the moment, so they are being looked at in the kind of UAE or the Saudi areas. So that's, but I mean, it's such a massive question, isn't it? Because, when I think about shelter in the context that you're speaking about, there are so many different levels to that. There is the people that live with the land. Then there's the people that can't afford to, pay for their own shelter. So therefore they have to claim benefits in order to fulfill, that requirement. And then there's, communities popping up. There's wealthy that can afford. There's people that are on the borderline. It's like, wow, where do we start with this? Like, what's the area to get into? I like the uncomfortable. Let's start in the most uncomfortable place for us.
Oh, I mean, there's still a huge stigma on even reaching that place of being a rough sleeper. So I've been a rough sleeper before. So for people who don't know what that is, that's when you don't have either by choice or by necessity, but you don't have a full-time place to live. So you're living mobile. And I did that when I was doing traveling shows, TV shows and stuff. So it was largely by necessity. But there's a huge stigma. People respond as if either you've messed up in some way, right? You've made mistakes and put yourself in that position is usually the typical response, whether they say that outright or not. But you can feel a shame and a guilt that's kind of impressed upon when you bring it up. And that's not even reaching the stage of you don't have anywhere to go. You are now homeless. Yet when we look at the statistics, there are millions of people, and not just in your giant metropolitan cities like London, but millions of people who are just a few months away from that happening. Like if the stock market crashed again, right? If you had another financial collapse, you would see a huge influx, right? So how do we get rid of the cultural stigma that people have? And I think and I'm curious what you guys think, because it could be just as much about judgment as it is about people don't wanting to relate. They don't want to think about themselves being there. So they're rather dismissive instead.
Yeah, I remember in the last recession, so was that 97 in the UK specifically? I think it was around that time. Was it 2000s? Anyway, the last recession, it feels like we're kind of going through different cycles, but I remember at the time I decided to drop out of my office type job, and I worked for the local park. And it was, I lived in Brent, so it was in Wembley. And, my job was literally looking after the park. So sweeping up the leaves, planting the flowers, making sure the park looked tidy, working for the council, basically. And there was this homeless guy, a really vivid memory of him, because he had such an unusual story, which was he had gone through a divorce. Because and he shared some information about it. I think there was some adultery that happened from his wife, and she'd met somebody else, and he was forced into a divorce. But the only way for him to be able to live through the back end of this divorce process was to become homeless, because if he was seen to have any type of financial income, then that would have had to go to his wife. It's just the way the cards fell in terms of the divorce proceedings. And I was like, wow, this was a super intelligent, articulate, white, middle-class man that had been through just this, awful family breakup and circumstance. And he had to commit to living on the streets with no income at all in order for that to be the outcome of the situation that the courts had laid upon his. And I was like, wow, this is one micro story of millions, if not billions of people around the world that are forced into situations because of quote unquote a system. And oh look, I got balloons for that system. So it strikes me that the the man-made concepts of existence and lifestyle is the very thing that gets us into these, or gets people into those situations, right? It's not about being human, it's about the human condition, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly, right? That's not, for that person, for that situation, that wasn't something they got into simply because they had made poor decisions. I mean, relationships are one of the, besides job related ones, romantic relationships are the other biggest reason why people end up in the situations, right? You have a life together, so you have a lot of things intertwined, and then when it's over, you have to figure out like how that happens. One person keeps one person doesn't. So, yeah. And in the most volatile ones, we've seen many disaster scenarios where one person is literally just left with nothing. It's
Tess, I can see you're brewing on some words of wisdom that are about to emerge from your beingness. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about these definitely two versions of that process. One is the physical shelter, like having a house, etc., a place to be. But then I feel lots of people are more and more also
I
getting
like
into
that
that
direction.
mentally. So it's almost as if
Well,
their
I think you bring up a
mental home
great point there, because
got
it seems
evicted
like
and I have to leave
there's
it.
more of a values driven focus, right? That a lot of people
with
have.
all what's going on, it's just massive. So
I
people,
guess, empowers us to feel like we
even
can
don't want
express
to
more
leave their
vulnerabilities,
inner being, but they
showcase
are
publicly
shaken up
more
to
of our
leave
authentic
it.
selves.
Or
But then at the same
sometimes
time, I guess
even
the flip
whipped
side
out.
is that also feels like it's
And we
being
have these
weaponized more
two
than
things,
ever.
and we always look more for the
And how is
physical
that
things,
possible, right? People are more inclined and more empowered,
the
and
mental
yet
one
it's
is
also
huge.
being used against them more.
And again, we get
Where
into a huge different topic.
I feel like, to your point, it's hard to find where our safe spaces are.
That just came up, and it gets even
feel
more
like we even have that.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's not always in our physical home.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because so to adopt him, I think that's really crucial.
You know what comes to mind when you're speaking about this is like, I was just trying to put myself into a situation where when I've been in dire straits,
more
and there have
clinging
been
to their safe
moments,
spaces in terms
and
of
I've always
the fear
luckily
of
had
dealing with discomfort, or the
for
fear
you
of
know for whatever
things are
reason
changing. So
that
I also need to
opportunity to be
change
able to
something.
connect with my
So,
safe space, which is that inner space.
people
So
cocoon,
whatever
or
environment I've
people
been in that has been
resist
absolutely
to
critical and
get
kind
through
of,
that threshold,
really borderline
that
of
is inherently painful,
dysfunctional
and
in
it's super
society,
uncomfortable.
I've
So
always
I
had
think
that, luckily, had that
we all know
opportunity
from
to
our
go,
different
okay, let me
either
flip
spiritual
my outside
directions
world
or
into
coming
my
from, you
inside
know,
world, and there
there
I
is
can
this
find the
threshold and
sanctuary
you
or
need
the
to break
safe
through,
space and the
but it's
peace,
just
which is exactly what I
easier
think you're
said than
describing as
done.
that spiritual place. And then the other thing I was reminded of is I was thinking about Nelson Mandela, and this is a person that was standing up for a cause and then imprisoned, and a different form of shelter, a forced into situation of imprisonment, and that this person, and there have been many stories like this, of course, but this person had been able to find that inner peace, or that inner connection, or that something, so that after the years and decades of being forced into a non participatory shelter, came out with this whole new essence of beingness. And the reason I'm saying
Yeah.
this is because I like to look at things from a perspective that maybe our human experience is one of multitudes of human experiences, and maybe we chose to incarnate into this world, into this body, into this lifestyle, into our family, into our environment, in order to experience that specific moment. And maybe we choose in another life, if you believe in reincarnation, which I do, maybe you choose a different experience and a different experience and a different experience and a different experience. And then, that one where you are perhaps homeless or don't have shelter or don't feel safe, maybe your spiritual being has chosen that as an experience for you to learn from, or for the universe to learn from itself about. So I don't want to get too philosophical, and it's easy for me to say that because I am in an environment where I do have shelter and income and everything else. But I can honestly say there have been times in my life where that hasn't been the case.
I like that you bring up Mandela too, because it kind of reminds me of how we approach forgiveness. Right, like when we're in moments of dire straits, and I've been in those moments many times, where you're not sure what's going to happen next. You're not, but I find that someone like Mandela is a great example of someone who understands that forgiveness isn't necessarily about them, about the other person or anyone else. It's about ourselves, right? How do we keep our own hearts from being hardened, and finding a peace that we can move forward with. That kind of feels like, if there is a great ask, or a series of great asks of us, in this journey, is how do we find peace and be led by that, regardless of what's happened to us or how we're treated. So I find that forgiveness is a huge one there. Like, it's not really for anyone else. Oh, I forgive you. Like, when you tell people that, I feel like that's more for ourselves. How can I keep myself from becoming just hardened and aggressive and bitter, any of that, right? Resentful, and keep moving forward. Yeah. I found that to be my saving grace, to kind of think on that anytime I'm in a tough spot.
I also just think maybe that's also a personal question to you guys, or to us all. how did you came to that state of being
Great
that
question.
you would go innerly into yourself and find out and
It is a great
kind
question.
of find that kind of inner shelter, which also helps you then to be sheltered in the real life,
I think
like in
the
physicality.
biggest
Like
memory that I have of
because
how do you do this
we all
practically,
know
I just
what is going
remember
on,
as a
and
child
so much people are
being in
still
relatively
don't even
unsafe
have that inner
environments
kind of connection.
and
And
having
it's
this
like, I don't
ability
want to talk
to be
about
able
matrix as
to
well. You know, it's a
create,
they don't
I
have
don't
yet that
know,
awareness that
like a kind of
that is even possible.
a Jedi
That you have
moment,
something
like
in
being able
yourself,
to create some kind
and
of
then
protective
from
kind of
that
force
foundation
field.
to
I
go
know
out.
it
So,
sounds weird, but I
how
do remember
what's
as a
this practice?
child being in
how do you do this
unsafe
practically?
environments and having the ability to be able to
Or how have you done this
know that
practically?
there was some guiding force with me, like, angelic angel type thing, or knowing
Sure,
that
go.
I had the tools in order to be able to protect myself. I definitely as a toddler remember that experience. And so I'm wondering now for me whether that's something that has carried through to every single part of my life, if I've chosen to remember that moment. So that was for me. But I think the other thing to say is, I am half Indian, and my father's family were deeply spiritual. So maybe energetically, DNA, however you want to call it, maybe there is this kind of inbuilt system. But then I could take it back even further. Did I incarnate with choosing the ability to remember this thing that we call sacred or magic or unusual? I don't know, but I'm just saying from my personal experience, and of course not everybody's going to be able to relate to that because it won't be their experience, but it certainly was mine, and it's definitely mine now because I choose to nurture that connection.
So it's really great to like to hear too how that can evolve, like how that can start, early in life, right, and evolve as we, you know, move along, right. That it's not like a stagnant thing. It becomes a real core part of ourself. I find something similar. I mean, I grew up being exposed to a lot of Christian churches, and so I mean, regardless of what people believe, my biggest takeaway that I've really carried with me this whole time was, uh, the stories of how someone like Jesus would respond to, even people, physically trying to torture them and everything and discredit, with kindness, right? And I was like, how can I emulate that like, letting anger, ride me as my like go-to emotion doesn't seem to make anyone happier. Doesn't say it's useful. Like anger is useful. I love how people can conflate hate with anger. Like hate is not useful, but anger can be useful. They're not the same thing. But yeah, so I kind of use that as an inspiration for like, it must be possible that we can respond to things, even terrible things, with kindness and with kind of a soft spokenness. And so I've always tried to kind of keep that like centered in me. It's not easy. It's definitely not. Especially
You
because
are
I
very
have,
good. You are very good at it, though. You are definitely. That's the memory that I have of you, of somebody that energetic, very Buddhic in your approach to
well,
external
that's
experiences.
that's it, right? Like just kind of prioritizing that energy. Because I also have complex PTSD, which I shared recently on another show about how one of the main symptoms of it is feeding revenge fantasies into your psyche. That's literally a symptom,
Ouch!
right? Because it's a trauma induced acquired neural condition, right? So if your core is trying to tell you like be led by kindness, that's going to win the day no matter what's going on in your life or how hard it is, or no one's really responding to you the way you want. how do you do that? And on top of it, have a condition that's feeding you like, no, you should want vengeance for things not working out and for those who have hurt you or just are destructors. And I think for me, that just adds another challenge on top of it of there's demons to conquer. We all have demons to conquer. So those are mine. And I feel like, exactly what we're talking about is how to conquer that biggest challenge. Turn the other cheek mentality.
So before I go into my own journey, I just want to highlight a few things. I made some notes. So what I found interesting in both your stories that you were born into certain situations, upbringing, being very unique in that upbringing, how you grew up, and there was some kind of self-acceptance, but also a nurturing that, so you made that in some way over periods of time into your own advantage. So that's what I kind of heard from that. And when I look at my upbringing, I was born into a evangelic family. My parents were missionaries in China, and I was growing up in this kind of very strong faith-based family, and there was also kind of more rules to it. But these things only became aware to me much later in life because I thought this would be normal. But I think I early on I also knew I was really different, but I could never articulate what this is. And only later in life, even in the last 5 years, it became apparent to me that my identity is radically different how I was born, and nobody told me that. And so kind of I think my life is that I was growing up very sheltered in a way, very being in a bubble. And then the further I opened myself to the world, both through my profession and my curiosity, that shelter kind of broke up, and more of my real being came. But then there was this clash, the clash between how you're growing up, how you got nurtured, being yourself unique, and suddenly seeing and exploring yourself, and there's this disconnection between. And that's, I think, where the most interesting things happen, because suddenly you feel, okay, in order to be my true self,
I love this inquiry. I know it's kind of gone from we kind of looked about shelter, but actually it seems to be like it's actually coming back to
belonging in this
like
real world of you being
vehicle
you, being
that we are
the
kind
real
of living
text,
in.
the
I
real
love this.
band,
This
the
is
real
brilliant.
Jarvis. And it's so challenging. And
For
then
me,
I come back to the question, like we talked about our ways of growing up.
The outside world
tons of people out there.
It's probably about as chaotic as we understand it to be in our history. Like, the history that we know, we are probably about the most chaotic that we've certainly in knowledgeable history, right?
Become your true self.
My way of dealing with that is not to ignore, because I think a lot of people do ignore when it comes to what's going on in Ukraine, in Syria, in various other war zones around the world, what's going on in countries of genocide, what's going on with malnutrition, lack of water, etc. So that's one big issue. Then you've got your climate change issues. Then you've got your political leader issues, then you've got your government issues, then, you know, I mean, it just literally goes on and on
It's
and
a
on,
lot.
right? So it's a lot. So my way of dealing with that is to counterbalance my outside experience with deep inner practice. That I truly believe we live in a polarized in a system, whatever you want to call it, paradigm, earth, universe, whatever, hologram, you know, there's all different variations of it. But to me, it seems to be a polarized one. And what do I mean by that? There is day and night, there's in and out breath, there's male and female. You know, there seems to be a polarity to kind of nearly every experience. So what I try to do is I try to take everything back to its essence, like to its core, like the homeopathic approach to fixing illness. And the essence of my potential addiction to chaos on the outside, the polarity to that is finding stillness on the inside. So I religiously, and I don't mean, you know, like church religion, I mean a personal inner religion, is that I make sure that I counterbalance every day, every morning when I wake up by doing inner engineering or inner practice. And luckily, there are philosophies around in the world that this is called a kriya, but there's meditation, there's yoga, there's sitting on the earth, but it has to be inwards. Because if I am engaging in the outside at all, then I'm literally feeding that addictive loop that I think most people in society are caught up in, because we haven't been trained that there is the inner access to something as well as the outer. So I know it's a long-winded answer to your question, but the way I try to train people is firstly to get them to stop and to go within and assess what's going on inwards. And then you can get to the point, and I know this to be true, you can get to the point where you can clear stuff that's going on the outside from within, so that when you come back to the outside, those things have already started to disperse or change. Now, what's fascinating about this is that could that be done en masse? There have been groups of people that have meditated for peace, that have meditated for quietening and calming certain areas of the world. I think it was done in New York or something. And people did actually literally see a physical response. So I know I'm waffling a little bit, but I just wanted to really get that out, because that's, for me, the key to the success of stable, peaceful, free living is to have that inner work as a balance.
I definitely agree, especially in having some kind of personal practice to commit to, right? Because so much of our apparatus, I guess, whether that's, you know, media and political or just things we're exposed to, are constantly kind of pushing our buttons of everything is urgent, everything has urgency. So if we're told everything is urgent, then it's hard for our own, you know, system to kind of figure out, where are we supposed to give our attention? Where are we supposed to find agency in our day-to-day? So yeah, I totally feel the same. Without having some kind of a personal practice, you know, whether that, for me, that's also very meditative. I need calm and quiet and kind of a sort of, what do you call it? A fortress of solitude, a bit, you know, that can be yours or share with others too. But yeah, I think that's huge, and I think, Tess, to your point too, so much of also what we're taught is that we all need to fit into a box. Like, people love putting things in boxes, right? That's not just like a work thing. That's oh, this is you, so this is your label now. This is how, you know, we recognize you or identify you, and whatever that is, right? But none of us are just one thing, right? I mean, I have people that know me that think I never talk, and then there's people that know me that think I never shut up. It just depends. depends on the day, right? Or depends on who it is. Some people you're more comfortable with, some not. So their interpretation of you can be very different. So right there, that's not existing in any one box. You literally have people who see you very differently, and you might, interact and engage with them very differently. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer of how we do away with boxes and people's obsession with it, but none of us exist in just one, right? So finding how to be our authentic self. I've found so much freedom, I guess, later in life. Once I hit 40, I think it's kind of a nice breakthrough of I don't really have to care as much anymore about what other people think of me. I can have my feminine days and I can have my masculine days, and I don't really care anymore if people find that strange or different, or I used to, but that feels very freeing and what's natural for me, and it just took a while to get there.
So interesting where it's going, because suddenly I feel we're coming back to the beginning in some way. I see it. Because what we're talking about, this interconnection and first being in ourselves and gathering our insights, look at the engineering, and then look at the outside, and things have already changed and shifted. And then you, Jarvis, asked, could this change the world? Or could that meaning change the world? And I come back to the shelters. Like, or even go back, because I saw your t-shirt, Jarvis, it's Blue Summit, and which is this conference, this impact conference. And lately I've been reading lots of people, on my British friends, lots of people been to conferences. And my gut feeling is right now, where Felix might go to this conversation here, what if also workplaces and
interestingly enough,
conference,
I've been into sustainability for like 15 years or something, and the main reason I got into sustainability because I was working in an environment, in a sector where it seemed that people were doing business with heart, and that for me was a nice space to be in. Like I felt with my tribe, and it was also important for me to be a voice for nature, etc., etc. And so, having gone through, a decade and a half of this sector, this kind of this community, and it is very much a community growing all the time.
What is that?
Just in the last 2 or 3 years, when I've been invited to go and speak at events, or be on panels, or do a keynote, run a session, rather than doing sustainability thing, which is of course one of my areas of expertise, what I've actually said is, look, I think there's enough sustainability stuff going on in these environments. Let me bring some consciousness work in. Let me bring some spiritual work in. Let me bring some meditation in. Because that is actually my passion. That's what I love. That's where people will feel me the most. I can talk about sustainability all day long, but it's like, and interestingly enough, over the last, look, it's making my hair stand on end, just like talking about it. Interestingly enough, people have been really receptive to it since COVID, since the pandemic. It's like, yes, please come in and run a session in the morning before everybody starts their day on meditation. Now, granted, not many people show up, right? Because, you push the session out, you do the session. Most people get into busyness immediately and just think, I don't need that. But in other times, I've been able to do it to the big halls, like, to hundreds of people all at the same time. And it is fascinating how quickly the energy of a group can change by bringing in this I guess it's a stop button. It literally is just a moment for everybody to go, take a few deaths, focus on your breathing, literally like disconnect from that addiction on the outside, and boom, it brings people into, I believe, certainly my experience, into a more community, unified, loving space. But anyway, so it's just specifically related to conferences. Why do we go to conferences? We either go because we're interested in the whatever the exhibition's about or whatever the conference is about, or probably more likely we go to be with people that are, kind of interested in the same thing as us. I bet if you ask the question, like, most people wouldn't admit to that, but it's probably the main reason why we show up, is to be amongst people that are, at least on a similar vibration to us or interested in the same subject. That is a massive form of shelter, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know for me, I go to a lot of conferences. Sometimes I speak at some, but I'll go to a lot where I'm not. And unless I am basically ordered to go, right? Like you work for someone and they say, "Oh, we want you to go to this thing." Unless it's that, unless you're being directed to go, I find it very difficult to go, to your point, unless I know someone else who's going.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the biggest reasons is exactly what you said. It's, yes, there's things to learn. There's, things to pick up on and congregate. But the biggest reason is for the sociality. It's you can't substitute that energy and that authenticity than getting to really be around people, and especially people who are sharing in a care and a concern for the same things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, also we're coming kind of closer to the end of the day. I just we made this bow, and I think we're going into a quite interesting direction. What you both said, that kind of sameness, or being with people.
You know what? It's funny when you said that. I just had this kind of
thing,
idea of a conference pop up. Maybe we should do it,
where
there is no theme.
Where I think
there is no specific. There is no specific person you're targeting. But it's just the conference of coming together to recognize difference or experience
sameness
anything out of the echo chamber. Wouldn't that be such a cool idea? But hold on a minute. Isn't that what this earth is about? Isn't that what we've come for? This big earthly conference?
For inner connection and being aware. Then this can bridge into the world, which is not the same. I think that's would be the interesting step from here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and people like anecdotal evidence, right? Especially since we,
Yeah.
a lot of us, and particularly at a conference where you have people in the room who are recognized as
I thought
experts, which
was
is why they're usually
very much the
on
same
stages and such.
sensing of you
So
recently with
in the
someone, and he
absence
said, I
of
mean,
that, people love
look,
anecdotal
I mean,
evidence. So
just have be a
if people
weekend
like
together
us
and there's
are already
no
willing
programming, and we
to
just we ask each other what's
speak
going on, and then you
openly
sense it, and
about
suddenly at the end you
vulnerabilities
meet these new people, and you
and
make new vows
personal
and
anecdotes,
new
I find that
observations,
that's
and you
also
say, well, let's
kind
build
of
this thing. I mean,
a thing that
it's
helps
just
break
radically
open
different
those environments
because we have
for
this
other
too much
people to do
sameness.
so too,
And
right? Because
the beautiful thing is, you
then the
all said
comeback
how
is,
you
oh
were
well,
growing up.
I have
You
an
were unique
anecdote too
beings,
of something that's a
but
bit
still, I
personal,
mean,
and then right, and then you started to kind of crack open that environment for people to be like, oh, maybe this is a place that's a bit safer to share, and people are on a similar wavelength.
Fascinating. I've loved this conversation. I do really enjoy, because we're just such different characters and personalities and lives. It's like I really love chatting to you both. It makes my heart kind of, you know, explore areas that I wouldn't ordinarily explore because, I don't know, I just wouldn't. So thank you for that. It was beautiful. Should we
Always.
should we call it a day as we're coming close to our
Sure.
kind of time slot?
Oh, this was solid. Yeah.
This is good. This is good. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
spontaneous. I love that.
Keep
And
it
that's
fluid.
exactly what this is all meant to be about. Beautiful. Well, that's the end of our second sesh.
It's awesome. Yeah. It's um I, I was gonna add a bit because I'm actually going to another conference in a couple of days, and what you guys said was I was gonna try something where I asked the audience in the room to take 2 minutes, like
yeah,
1 minute each, and talk to someone else and just share one personal thing.
yeah.
Except I would give them permission if they want to. They don't have to, but
Thank
give
you
them
for
permission to
talking.
be deceptive
And everyone
if they
who's really
choose to
Oh,
be
listening to
that's
this, I
fun.
deceptive
mean, we
about
don't
what
have
they
That's
any
share,
fun.
questions. So what I do
Yeah.
next, I mean,
and not
it's all
ask them
in
to
there.
have to
So
share
that's
back
the beauty
right
of it.
to the whole room, but just to ask the room, how many of you believed the person you were talking to,
Mm.
right? Felt immediate
Yeah,
trust from them,
Yeah.
or did you feel not knowing?
yeah.
They could have been totally truthful. That's it. They
Cool.
weren't
Yeah.
directed to be
See you
untruthful,
next
right?
time.
Yeah.
But if you're given permission that in this room there's not an expectation of just full truth, and you're meeting strangers, how many people immediately feel like there's trust with the stranger they just met, right?
I love that. I
But it
love
makes
that.
you wonder, right? How much do
Yeah.
we, when we enter rooms like that, even though we might have things in common, we're there for a similar topic, does that just mean there's any kind of immediacy in trust? I don't know, man.
Mm.
Makes you
Yeah, I
wonder.
love that. Maybe that should be our next session. Truth,
Cool.
truth or untruth. Love that. It's a brilliant idea. Let us know the outcome. Thank you both. Really, really lovely to see you. And I hope
Yeah, I
everybody out
appreciate
there
you,
that's
Bob.
been listening to us has enjoyed our conversation. Do contact us. There will be a way of getting in touch with us to give us subjects in your comments. So thank you, everybody. And much love to you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Talk to you next. Thank you both. See you next week.